What's up, everybody? Derek Anderson, the DA, and you knew the responses were going to keep coming about the Woman King. They're getting all the heat in the world, and it's coming from the black community. Don't get it twisted. It's coming directly from the black community, and these women absolutely hate it, especially the director and some of the folks that were involved with the making of this film. And you can see it right here. This is the story. It's from the LA Times. They're coming back. The truth behind the Woman King crew responds to claims of historical revisionism. Now, I'm not sure what there is to complain about or what there is to respond to, because Viola Davis has already come out and admitted to it. This article came out on Variety just a couple of weeks ago. Woman King star Viola Davis and Julius Tenen talk box office victory and defend film against historical critics. We have to take license. And here's a quote right here. First of all, I agree with Gina, Prince-Bythewood, saying that you're not going to win an argument on Twitter. We entered the story where the kingdom was in flux at a crossroads. They were looking to find some way to keep their civilization and kingdom alive. It wasn't until the late 1800s that they were decimated. Most of the story is fictionalized. It had to be. And this person followed up, we are now what we call edutainment. It's history because we have to take license. We have to entertain people. So I honestly don't see what the argument is about. I don't understand why they're taking, some people say, hey man, you told us a bunch of mythology, or you made up a whole bunch of nonsense. It's fictional, it's fantasy. So I don't see why they're upset about this, okay? Yeah, they're responding to the claims of historical revisionism, and they're crying about it. They're upset that they're being called out, and they're trying to backpedal and defend their fictionalized fantasy show. Hey, you chose to make the film the way you chose to make it, okay? Nobody put a gun to your head and said, make it all up. Tell us a fictional fantasy story about women empowerment. Nobody said to do that, okay? That was your choice. Let's go ahead and kind of check out the article and see what they have to say. So it starts off with this quote. Says here that there's a quote often attributed to Winston Churchill that asserts history is written by the victors. This idea is what allowed American students to be universally taught that Christopher Columbus found America, so on and so forth. It allowed Black Americans to be taught that their history begins with the onset of chattel slavery. It's what makes it so hard for people to shed unconscious biases and allow for new perspective to add color to things they previously took as fact. All right, so keep in mind, they've already said the story is completely made up. I just want you guys just to keep this in mind as we move forward through this article. Because you can already kind of see what they're saying. Well, history is written by the winners, so what's really real? What's really truth? You can see where they're going with this already. So here's what she said. This is the director, Gina, Prince-Bythewood. My issue is that the history they think we are revising, they are actually parroting incorrectly, said Prince-Bythewood, of the manufactured conspiracies and conflicts that circulate online. And there's a great irony in that, a great sadness. Literally, you are speaking on something that you actually don't know the truth about, and it feels like you're doing the work of the oppressor. They said they did a deep dive into the history of the Dahomey and the Agoge alongside the production designer, Ken McKenzie. They reached out to a historical consultant, Leonard Wanchikin, who was directly related to a member of the Agoge. She found much of the information written about the kingdom was from the perspective of European colonizers. Oh, so see, it's just a different perspective. These guys were telling their story. Our story's just as valid as theirs. That's what they're going to try to get you to believe. When we started doing the deep dive into the research, we realized the history of the women and the Dahomey was written from the oppressor's point of view. Now, let me just stop right there, because you could automatically see, as they said up here earlier in this article, you're doing the work of the oppressor, and now they're talking about the oppressor again. You can see just by the language that she's using, she isn't interested in looking at this matter in a holistic view, but from a specific point of view, right? She's already saying, hey, that's the oppressor. Don't listen to that, okay? Let's look at our version of the story, all right? We're going to tell you a completely different version of this story, and believe ours because, we're the right guys. We're the nice guys, That's basically what they're saying. And the funny thing is you could easily make the same claim in the reverse, right? That the Dahomey were the oppressors because they were capturing people, selling them into slavery. They were murdering people for ritual sacrifices. So, if we were to hear the history of the Dahomey from the Dahomey's point of view, I'm pretty sure we would get something similar to what you guys are saying. This kind of glossed over, worldview of, oh, this is how things really were. We just kind of sanitized it. All right, washed out all the horrible acts that happened. And they give a little bit of the background of this guy. He's he's a professor of politics and international affairs, and he has family from the area. So obviously, this guy is going to want to make this whole kingdom shine like a diamond, right? They're not going to try to put anything negative into this. I mean, come on, hey, it's our time to write history, okay? These guys wrote it. Now it's our turn to write it. It says it's a misconception that Dahomey was nothing other than a state involved with the slave trade. No, it's not a misconception. They absolutely were involved in the slave trade. They had other things going on. Of course, they had other types of trade that they were doing. And so it's not that they were doing nothing but slavery, but they were a slaver nation. That's what they did. Why do they keep trying to dance around it and gaslight you with this bullshit? Tell it like it is. I don't understand what do you get out of this? Okay? What do you get out of this? Nobody's buying it. It's a narrative built by Europeans to present the state as barbaric. No, it's really what happened, okay? You're going to tell me that all the ritual sacrifices didn't happen? Is that what you're going to try to tell us, okay? You're going to try to tell us that they didn't keep and own slaves themselves? Is that what you're going to try to tell us? And even in the movie itself, they were showing these warriors acting barbarically, okay? Acting barbarically, cutting off people's heads and giving it to them. Hey, we're cutting off your messengers' heads. I mean, they showed that stuff in the movie. I mean, if that's not barbaric, I don't know what is. But at the same time, primary sources detail how respectful and sometimes scared they were about Dahomey. For instance, if you read the correspondence between King Gilly and Otto von Bismarck, it was highly respectful. Well, maybe he was just highly respectful with all people that he corresponded with. I mean, what does that prove? I don't know if they don't make their points. They don't prove the stuff they think they're going to prove. Where Dahomey was at the time, the crossroads that Gezo was facing, the Oyo versus Dahomey battle, all of that is truthful and real and what the Agoji were fighting for, said Prince-Bythewood. It's not a documentary, but absolutely there's a tremendous amount of truth within this. When you look up Dahomey and the Agoji, you will see there's only one book on it, and it's a book that's offensive. What does that have to do with anything? Is it true? Okay, yeah, there's a lot that happened in history that offends us. We understand that. But is it true? Did it really happen? Okay, that's the only thing that matters. I don't care about if you offend me. Okay, I'm a grown adult. I can get through that. All right, but I want to know what really happened. What's the truth behind it? I just remember what happened following the release of Selma, Braveheart, and 300. There's a celebration and there's a small minority screaming about historical accuracy. Well, there's a need for historical accuracy when you're making a film about historical nations and historical people, right? Okay? I mean, if you didn't want to make a historically accurate film, you could have just made up a country, make it up out of your imagination, okay? Call it, womania or whatever, I mean, it's basically the same thing if you're not going to be as true to the story as you can, or if you're going to just leave out all the important details so you can just clean up the bad actions that this nation did. And then we hear from Raquel Gates, who is an associate professor of film and media studies at Columbia University. Film is not a window into reality. In some ways, it can be a mirror. You're translating a real life story into something that has to be cinematically legible, and it's interesting that we accept that with so many other types of films. Disney can't literally adapt grim fairy tales. Those would be some really horribly depressing films. Goodfellas doesn't tell the entirety of Henry Hill's life. It has to end at a point because there's a story. Well, look, you hear these arguments, y'all? Henry Hill, we still get the gist of who he was as a person, right? We still get the gist of who he was as a person, what he did, the things he got involved in, right? We know the life that he was living, even if you don't tell the entire story of his life from birth to death, all right? We still get an idea of who he was. But imagine for a minute if Martin Scorsese I'm just going to ignore the fact that Henry Hill was a womanizer and that he was a dope fiend. I'm just going to portray him as this kind, loving husband and a sober caretaker of the mob's money who never became an informant. No, that never happened. And we're just going to talk and tap dance around the rest of his life so we can tell the story that's heartening and powering and triumphant. That's what we want to do, okay? I mean, you've missed the best part of Henry Hill's life if you decide to do that. That's what they did with this film. It feels like a litmus test that nobody can really pass the way that it's being deployed in places like Twitter. There's all kinds of bad stories that are written about bad people that did bad things. And, the stories are still told well. I mean, it's like a Jeffrey Dahmer show out right now, isn't there? I haven't watched it, but it's a movie or a show about Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the worst serial killers in the world. And I'm pretty sure they didn't dance around his life. They told it exactly as it was. Okay? I mean, just tell the story. Just tell the story and be honest and truthful. We need history to be truthful, not fake and made up. Nobody will deny that the Dahomey were involved in the slave trade, but according to recent data, it accounted for roughly 3.5% of the trade, far less than Lagos, Ghana, and Angola. So it's important to put that in perspective. Well, I mean, if they come out with a movie about Lagos, Ghana, and Angola, right, and they make a movie about the slavers that lived at that time, and they try to romanticize their lives, and they make a female empowerment fantasy flick about the slavers of Lagos, Ghana, and Angola, and ignore all the brutality and everything else that was going on in those countries, I guarantee you, you'll get the exact same response, okay? But until they did, hey, stop trying to move the goalposts. Until they did, let's just talk about what we're talking about. People always try to shift the goalposts and change it away from what we should actually be discussing. So we're talking about a specific time in history, 1823. We're not talking about 1750 or 1870. Clearly, there was one thing on the mind of the king and the whole country, which was the oil empire. And how do you liberate yourself from economic dependence and having to pay tribute? I guess you do that by selling more slaves. I don't know. That was the focus. This movie was not about the whole history of the Dahomey. It is about a specific time where all the stars were aligned against continuing the slave trade. Again, I just want you to remember that Viola Davis, the actress herself, has already said most of the story is fictionalized. It has to be. They've already admitted, and now these directors are trying to backpedal and, oh, well, you know, it's just about this one period of time. They fictionalized the whole thing, okay? They can sit up here and lie about it if they want to, but they fictionalized the whole thing. The actress, the star of the show, said so. So, like, these articles really just don't serve us any good. They don't do any good for anybody, okay? It's just them trying to cover their tracks, and they, you know, they feel in some kind of way. You know, it's like there's a phrase that says a hit dog will holler. You know, like a hit dog will holler. If you was cool, if this thing had no issues, if you had no issues with the way you made this film, and you didn't feel some kind of way about it, you would just be like, hey, it don't apply. Let it fly. That's what you would do. But you're not doing that, and the reason you're not doing that is because, like I said, a hit dog will holler. I like this quote here. This is the first film focusing on black women in these positions of power, and it's not lost on me that there will be those that would actually denigrate this or try to bring this down. Like, why would you ever think that this was something that was going to be celebrated, beloved, and praised, considering the topic? Like I said, you would have been better off just creating a fictional nation, you know, that, and then you could tell any story you wanted to, okay? You could have said, well, they were slavers, but they were trying to end slavery. And then at the end of it, you could just say, hey, we kind of based this on some random stories that we got from various countries that were in Africa. You didn't have to tell the story about a real nation and then completely butcher it with your fantasy story. You didn't have to do that, okay? You didn't have to do that. What's the goal of film, said Gates? Is it to educate? Is it to portray history, or is it to capture the themes and the spirit of issues facing human condition? I've seen plenty of films that deal with the civil rights movement, slavery, where the filmmaker and the screenwriter will find that one random white person who was kind of sort of around and design the entire film around them as the hero and the protagonist. Now, is that historically accurate? I guess that white dude was around. Are you translating the spirit of the civil rights movements when you do that? No, you're actually doing something incredibly offensive by centering whiteness in a story that is supposed to be about blackness and about black liberation. You know, I actually thought that the entire point of the civil rights movement was that, you know, people would see beyond race, right? That you wouldn't judge people by their skin color, but by their character, you know, like who they are as actual individual people, right? That's what the civil rights movement was actually trying to do, you know, and get everybody on the same level playing field. We wasn't supposed to be trying to say, well, this is a blackness thing. You know, we're doing this for the blackness of the, this story is about blackness, okay? No, this story was about people, all right? Because there's plenty of white people that were on the civil rights movement, and that, you know, yeah, you could tell their stories just like you could tell the stories of black people, okay? But the movement that itself was the focal point, not your skin color. And the thing about it is that these guys are so hyper focused on skin color that they miss the entire point, okay, of being a human being, okay? They don't want people to be human beings. They want to focus and hyper emphasize their skin color and their race, and that's the worst kind of racist to me. The worst kind of racist is the person that just wants to focus solely on their skin color. That's what these chicks are doing. And so my question is, you throw historical inaccuracy out there, like you back it up. What do you think this film is doing that you find offensive? What are the stories and the way that stories get told that we as viewers have been trained and are comfortable in? What are the things that feel foreign to us? I just find it really fitting in an era where Hollywood is dominated by superhero movies that suddenly when you have black women in those positions, there's something about that seems to be bothering people. I think some people can't even fully put their finger on what it is that is bothering them about it. Well, when you say like, what is this film doing? I think it's doing a couple of things. Like, number one, I think it is glossing over and watering down some very important pieces of human history where people were sold into slavery, brutalized, massacred, beheaded, and you're doing it all for the sake of girl power, right? You're like completely watering down this stuff and you're doing it for the sake of girl power. That's trash. I mean, you know, again, I gave the film what I felt was a fair review. You know, I said, okay, I'm just going to look at it as a film because now I realize that this is just a fantasy show and none of this stuff really happened. I'll just review it based on the, you know, the film itself. But I still found it just to be underwhelming in terms of its story. And the fact that they had a really interesting story that they could have told on the back of it, that just hurt it. You know, great acting and all that stuff. I still believe Lashana Lynch probably deserves some kind of award, at least a nomination. She did a great job, you know. But like for the most part, I just found like this movie just to be kind of insulting and kind of a slap in the face for the history. That's the real problem because the film was marketed as real history. So that's the second thing that you guys messed up on was you marketed this film as real history. Okay. It's only now when the backlash is coming out that you're trying to backpedal and change the narrative and say, oh, well, you know, it's fiction. We got to make it fiction. It's a movie. What do you expect us to do? It's only now that you're doing that shit. And the thing is, there's been good and bad people of every race. I think people kind of understand that now. So if you went out and actually made an honest film and told some real truth that kind of the world really needs right now, I think it would have been a lot better. I think it would have been a more interesting film. And I absolutely believe that, yeah, this was a glorious opportunity to show the African slaver side of the slave trade. And you just absolutely botched it. You could have said, you know what, we're going to take a good long look at an actual African nation that, you know, because of their involvement in the slave trade, they really ended up shaping a lot of the current history. And, you know, we're going to dig into the deep reasons as to why, and we're going to start looking at this thing as it truly was. Okay. You guys had an opportunity to do that, but no, girl power. We got to do the girl power thing. Girl power. That's what it was about. Okay. You dropped the ball. Just admit it. And lastly, I think the thing that people can't put their finger on, but they kind of feel in their gut is that they've been lied to. There's a certain narrative and a certain agenda that was being pushed and spoon-fed into their mouths with this movie, okay? And the whole marketing campaign and everything. I think people can kind of feel like, you know what? I've been lied to. You guys are gaslighting me. This article is just another example of that. So I think that's what people are upset about. And the more you come out with the articles and the more you gaslight and the more you keep backpedaling on this whole thing, yeah, the more it proves that, yeah, you know, you guys are caught. You knew what you were doing and you decided that you were just going to go ahead and do it anyway. But anyway, folks, what do you think about this whole article, this LA Times article? Man, they just keep on coming. I think eventually they're just going to have to like shut it down and say, hey, we're just going to take what we're going to get. They're going to get all of the Oscars and the nominations and everything. You know, you guys know that stuff is coming for this film. But go ahead, leave me your thoughts and your opinions in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.